You again? Look fellas, while I don't have much nice to say about this Edgar Brapstein schmuck, I can't just ignore that he used to make pretty good shows. While Danny Phantom tripped up a little bit and the Fairly OddParents tripped up a lot, they both had great foundations and could appeal to all kids in a snap. But people change, and so do their creative decisions, which is why Butch's third show in 9 years was the most different and promising yet, Tuff Puppy. Seems like a stretch to say now, but back when it was about to come out, it looked like a new frontier for Billionfold. Both their previous shows were very similar in concept. Spiky-haired boy has access to fantastical powers and world, but this was a new genre, a new world full of anthropomorphic animals, and new story opportunities with an all-adult cast. But then it came out. It's been pretty polarizing ever since. Some people like it, others hate it. That's the case with basically every Nicktoon, but Tuff Puppy got easily the most mixed reaction of any of Butch's shows, because it has a fanbase smaller than the Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantoms, but it's not completely dismissed like Bunsen is a Beast. So this is going to be an interesting review. I'll be defending it just as much as I'll be tearing into it. But as always, I have to start from the beginning. Some of the earliest art Butch Hartman drew of Tuff Puppy dates to around 2005, and featured a dog with a gun. It goes without saying the edge was toned down by the time he started seriously pitching it to Nickelodeon. In fact, it turned from a more serious concept into a workplace comedy that parodied spy movies and films. This is basically spy year for this channel, isn't it? When it was announced in June 2009, Eric Bowser was implied to be in the lead role, but whether it be a recast or executive note, he was replaced by iCarly co-star Jerry Trainor. I barely watched iCarly, but from what I saw, Trainor was a charismatic enough actor despite the patchy writing. Still, you can tell he was cast as cross-promotion. iCarly was bigger than SpongeBob at the time, literally the only Nickelodeon series this century you could ever say that about. I'll just say this early, but the casting isn't the problem with the performances. Tuff Puppy eventually premiered on October 2nd, 2010, the same day as Planet Sheen. One of them certainly got the better first impression. There were some fans of Butch that were disappointed that he had apparently abandoned Danny Phantom, but it was popular enough to not get booted to Nicktoons after its first season. It took 2. And it ended on April 4th, 2015 after a pretty short third season. But at this point, a homegrown Nicktoon getting to a third season was a special occasion. Is that because of a positive reception from audiences, or because Butch was on Nickelodeon executives' wavelength?
Okay, Agent Puppy. We'll start today's training in the Tuff headquarters secret weapons room.
Awesome! What's this?
Dudley Puppy was a plain old mutt, except for the fact that he's the perfect mixed breed for crime fighting. One day, he becomes aware of a top-secret crime fighting organization called Tuff, and despite him not being very bright, he's hired pretty quickly and committed to taking down any evildoers in Petropolis. Not a bad premise at all, but you know what you're getting, so it may lack surprise and freshness. Like, if this was made in the 60s, it would fit quite snugly. Dudley and Underdog would be 2 peas in a pod. But definitely not characterization-wise. Here's the thing, Dudley had potential to be a great character, one that could learn to develop his canine senses and crime-fighting abilities, but those are all sorted out from the start depending on the plot, so you're just left with a protagonist who gets thrown the idiot ball over time, because that's apparently easier to write stories around. Classic Fairly OddParents had foolish characters, but they at least felt like they could learn something by the end of the episode. I trust Dudley way less, due to how inconsistent his skills are. His partner in crime fighting is Kitty Catswell, named so because she's really good at being a cat. She's mostly there to be the straight-laced foil, do most of the work, or get beaten up mercilessly by the laws of slapstick. Kitty and Dudley combine for a standard buddy comedy duo, but the brains of the operation are very one-sided. Their technology expert, Keswick, would have to be my favourite character on this show. They gave him some decent focus in invention-based stories, and since they didn't base him on any animal in particular, his mannerisms and lore get progressively stranger. A big drawback to him, however, is that he stutters a lot, and I don't think it was out of any kindness on the creative staff's part. If you have a speech impediment, just know Butch Hartman hates your guts. Their boss is the Chief, a little flea who carries himself around with an electric monitor with a blue background. Yes, even out in a place like this, the background is still blue. Again, he ticks all the boxes you'd want. He's gruff but got a good heart, stern but a little senile sometimes. He's got big bushy eyebrows until they get trimmed later on. There's a bunch of other field agents who hardly do anything, just leaving Tammy, their hyper-competent secretary introduced in late season 2. See, diversity hires do work. Even though the main characters are quite stock when you spend too much time with them, they're way more consistent than the villains. The Minius Snaptrap is a rat with a really squeaky, gravelly voice that gets hard to listen to after 2 episodes, so it's a good thing he appears in dozens. He's as annoying as he is incompetent, so he's hardly even a threat. More of a comic relief than anything. You honestly want to spend more time with his lackeys, Ollie and Francesco. I'd even prefer Larry. There, I said it. Bird Brain is the polar opposite. He's a smart booby and is generally fine, but his lackeys are a one-note joke dragged out too long. Every time they do their routine, you have to play a 5-second waiting game for it to be over so the action can resume. They're a pace breaker, nothing more. The Chameleon rounds out the main trio of bad guys, and would probably be my favorite of them. Sure, he needs a Tron suit to transform into other objects, but he has the most humanity of anyone here, getting beaten down by the world constantly and just wanting a friend. An even less successful group of evildoers is Flop, which includes the Meerkat, Wannabe, and a Scapegoat. All of them except for Wannabe are elaborate puns, who gets a bit more focus towards the end of the show. Quacky is a kids show host who's turned to the dark side, constantly taking advantage of the fact that Dudley still likes his work to land him in trouble. Fine character, usually dreadful stories that are too self-aware about their contrivances to even function properly. He also has a moose friend. Moving on. There's Jack Rabbit, a suave British former Tuff agent who's now evil. I'm highlighting him over other minor villains because they really had something here, but didn't give him enough attention to further delve into his relationship with Tuff. There aren't many other characters of importance. More notoriously, there's a goose called Mr. Wong who embodies at least a dozen Chinese stereotypes. It wasn't great when the Fairly Odd Parent... Sorry, wrong screen cap. It wasn't great when the Fairly Odd Parents was doing them in 2003, but you'd think these writers would have grown up by now. You also get some mothers, the most prominent being Dudley's mother, Peg. There's a few differences between them in smarts and stature, but you can tell it stayed loving. Anyone else? Eric the water cooler repair guy is eye catnip for Kitty. If you ever wondered what happened to Dan Danger, here, he got reincarnated as a furry. Happy now?
Oh, sweet freedom! I saw things in that jail no one should ever see!
You were in a holding cell, and the only thing in there was a vending machine.
But it was all out of cookies, and it wouldn't take my $1.
The thing with Tuff Puppy you have to get used to is that sometimes it forgets what genre it even is. The premise is always that Tuff is a secret agency, but sometimes the writers will forget that and turn it into a cop show. Dudley and Kitty will show up to schools to talk about the importance of their jobs, which isn't something secret agents do, because they're secret. And locking the villains behind bars becomes an increasingly common indicator that their job is done. It's weird, the theme song states that Dudley is doing secret agent stuff. It's a parody of Secret Agent Man for Pete's sake. But some of the writers were under the impression this was a cop show. But this is only one example of the producers being very lenient with the script writing quality. Joke-wise, it falls into a lot of the same traps the Fairly Odd Parents started falling into over time. Like running gags that could have been fun if they just added something to the gag, instead of just putting funny words together and hammering them in every 3 minutes. Another one of their favorite tricks is having 2 characters in different scenes and groups doing the same thing. The joke being that it's weird both the good guy and bad guy like the thing. Not sorry I explained the joke into nothing, because they do it multiple times, and it somehow makes the world feel less dynamic. It's one of the worst ways to do their old blatantly telegraphed subversion. You'll also notice the characters fall asleep a lot in this show. Not because these instances are all exceptionally memorable, but because Guy Moon's little rockabye baby jingle is burnt into my brain now. In general, the soundtrack for this show is quite repetitive, not badly orchestrated at all, but it feels like you've heard every major theme too many times by the end. I'll give Guy credit for going with a new sound again. The Fairly Odd Parents was big band, Danny Phantom was techno, and now he's doing 60s rock. All his shows have commonalities, but the music genre is always tweaked, which keeps them unique and appeases fans of all the genres. And I'll also defend Tuff Puppy on the very diverse story selection. The writing is very plot-driven, with the premise being the primary focus, the jokes being the secondary focus, and the character development, introspection, analysis, growth, understanding, do you know who made this show? Basically, any episode could be your favorite. Anything they do could scratch the right itch. It's generally a good sign when that's the case, but by that same token, any episode could also be your least favorite attempt at entertainment. If the concept bores you and the jokes they make about it don't land, then it's going to be a frustrating time. I think I've been pretty hard on Tuff Puppy so far, and I haven't even gotten into the first season yet, so happy thoughts. Here you go, season by season now.
Bon Jovi!
Aha!
I'll say right now that if you want a fine show that's not too awful but also not amazing, Season 1 of Tuff Puppy will deliver that. It's by far the most consistently okay of the bunch, and there's nothing wrong with the first season being that way. Most of the time, when I get to the end of an episode, I'll be thinking, that was okay, but I'm not itching to see the next one. This is definitely the kind of cartoon designed to be watched once a Saturday morning. If you watch too much of it too quickly, the nagging issues will pile up. Those nagging issues vary across the show's run. Early on, it's some of the more generic sitcom and cartoon plots you have to get through, plot points so episodic it makes the canon feel disjointed, pointing out questionable things which only makes them more questionable, but the later seasons have a few more tricks up their sleeve for you. By and large, they do a decent job setting up the world, and most of the villains have serviceable debuts. If not, there's a higher chance they'll be one-offs, due to them not leaving strong enough of a first impression. Each of the 4 main characters are given plenty of things to do in Season 1, plenty of their own episodes to show off how they would each deal with a conflict. It quickly establishes they each have unique storytelling possibilities, but sadly, the later seasons don't do enough for some of them to find their voices. One area where they definitely backed themselves into a corner was with the title and end cards. With Billy and Fold's prior shows, they were pretty straightforward. Just make pretty title cards, then put the end on them. Very classy and classical. In Tuff Puppy, each of the title credits are displayed in case files, with a few plot-relevant photos dotted around. But these tiny black and white photos don't do enough to show you what the episode is gonna be like. The idea for the end cards make up for that at first, with the characters in some sort of peril before striking a pose like they're taking a photo. It's a weird and silly way to cap things off, and fits the environment of the title cards. But they only do this a few times at the start of the first season, then hardly ever again. It's mostly just generic end cards, or a character on a black background getting in one last laugh. The Fairly OddParents started doing that more often around this time too, and it always struck me as pretty desperate. Ladies and germs, you've just witnessed the most pointless talking point in the history of this channel. Look, who are you gonna be more disappointed with? Me, or the person who used the same stock art of the Chiefs 6 consecutive times in the credits? But speaking broadly, the animation on this show isn't half bad. It's got the same draws and drawbacks as the Fairly OddParents around this time. Tired of me comparing these two? Sorry. But honestly, I can live with the extra shading in Tuff Puppy, since it makes it feel like a different world. Something they struggle with, however, is depth. When they whip out the dated CGI, it's still oddly charming and nostalgic, but the character designs are a mixed bag. Every single character was designed to be most appealing from a 3x4 angle, but more than that, only appealing from that angle. Except for Dudley, his front profile is alright. With everyone else, it gets more and more obvious that their turnaround sheets were thrown together, because some of them have strange design quirks if you dare to take them in. I know these characters are two-dimensional, but this is ridiculous!
We picked a bad day to install a giant razor-sharp ceiling fan at Tuff. Hurry, Agent Puppy! You've got to stop it before the ship hits the fan!
Season 2 suffers the most from confusion over the packaging order. Tuff Puppy got 60 episodes across 3 seasons, which you think would mean 20 episodes per season, especially since they switched to HD at episode 21. But nope, some knuckle schmuck at Nickelodeon likes to make the first 2 seasons 26 episodes long, and season 3 the remaining 8 episodes. That means only 14 of these episodes are definitely season 2, and another 18 are maybe season 2 depending on the weather. I'll have to go by packaging order for this review, just to cause less confusion. But this isn't the end of your trouble with this mid to late period of the show. While not my least favorite season, 2 is by far the least consistent. When it's good, it feels like a proper continuation of season 1. When it's bad, it's an obnoxious mess of gags. gags that you can sense are being pushed instead of naturally coming from a situation. It partly has to do with the voice acting getting worse too. These actors are very talented, I want to make that clear, but whoever their voice director was only seemed interested in saving the most extreme takes. There's a lot more yelling as the show goes on, even though the earlier episodes showed they didn't need to yell things to make them funny. It comes off as a crutch, like they knew the scripts weren't the best, but that didn't stop them from trying to find a really irritating solution around it. Never mind that the writers already sometimes like to point out how hammy or forced some plot points are. There's just less confidence all around in this period. Like everyone knows they're losing full control over the production and are trying to fix it in their own jokey ways. It would be endearing if the end results weren't so untrustworthy.
Anyway, where was I? You were saying that Louise was your least favorite sister!
Would you stop yelling?
Season 3 is the worst of the bunch this time, but I was expecting that. If it is only the last 8 episodes, there's a big disadvantage right off the bat. It's going to have less time to impress you. Combine this with the more light-headed vibe of Season 2 persisting, and you have a show that's running on fumes. The nicest thing I can say about Season 3 is that they knew this was a good place to end it. The finale has a sense of weight to it, they play around with the world a bit more in interesting ways, and even though the end results aren't always good, I can tell a lot of fun was being had with the making of this show. Enough for it to rub off on me and give them a glowing and detailed top 10 list? No way, but they could do with a supportive and adequate top 7 list. Till Doom Do Us Part is the biggest knock against Kit Dudley shippers. The show has a lot of cliches, but I'm relieved making the two leads fall in love with each other just because they're the leads wasn't one of them. A lot of good marriage jokes here too, if you need a reason to laugh. Dancing Machine is your timely DDR episode. Hey, this game never should have gone out of style. It's a little odd that Kitty fully trusts Snaptrap to be her dancing coach, but this is a vibes episode, if you need the hint. Carbon Copies is the right kind of madness. It starts with Dudley playing in some kind of imagination realization chamber, and things stay weird with rogue figments and an evil president. It loses some momentum at the barbershop, but the concepts still carry it pretty far. The Curse of King Mush is a mummy episode, I'm contractually obligated to like these. It's got the best grasp of the main 3 villains dynamic too. The chameleon is the textbook definition of a sympathetic villain. A Tale of Two Kitties may be a blatant rehash of Garfield 2, but it gave us a pretty interesting new adversary, Kitty's evil twin, Caddy. You may have noticed by now that Kitty's the star of most of my favourite episodes, mainly because she can carry a relatively involved story. The Good, the Bad, and the Quacky is the best Quacky episode by a long shot. It's less about him easily duping Dudley again, and more about this sadistic game show he's cooked up for everyone. It keeps you on the edge of your seat with how varied the traps are and the unpredictability in who could fall for them. And my favourite episode, Agent of the Year, is a very exaggerated competition between Dudley and Kitty to see who can arrest the most people. But beyond the social commentary on overcrowded prisons, I feel the most energy in their dynamic here. It genuinely seems like they're impressed with each other, even if their competition is nuts. And you know what else is nuts? These 7 pecans. Lovebird is about Bird Brain zapping people with a love gun, including Dudley, who basically falls in love with him. Seeing him get zapped to the villain side only magnifies his negative traits, and as the chief points out, it's wrong that he's fallen in love with someone twice his age, a 23-year-old.
Now wait a minute.
Dead or a Lie is about Dudley pretending it's his last day alive to get everything he ever wanted from Kitty, so no justification or punishment would make me want to root for him. The B-plot's way better, which is why it isn't in the bottom 5. Pup Goes the Weasel is about Dudley, Kitty, and Snaptrap becoming a suburban family so they can catch a villain called the Weasel. It makes sense in context, but none of the jokes do. You mostly just get Dudley and Snaptrap fighting like children here. It's not fun. Bad Eggs is one where every plot point is more forced than the last. It's hard to believe anything is happening for a reason. And by this point, Birdbrain's minions being around was enough of a reason for me to find an episode tough. That's tough with an O, not an endorsement of the series. Quack in the Box is one of many under-justified Quacky romps, where there's no reason he's being let out of jail so quickly, no reason he could have this high-profile job after all his crimes, and no reason for Dudley to stay a devout fan given how the birds put him and his friends' lives in danger. Those aren't even problems with the episode, just the concept of it and many later Quacky episodes. Tourist Trap is an episode that doesn't care about tension. It's there, but not taken seriously. Kitty is close to drowning, and Dudley and Snaptrap keep getting sidetracked since they're in a vacation spot. Yeah, Snaptrap's there, and only for jokes. Someone was really trying to squeeze whatever they could out of him while they still had the time. And my least favorite episode, Quacky Birthday, literally starts by lampshading how stupid a lot of these Quacky episodes are.
Whoa, Ducky Cheese is awesome! It's got laser tag, a ball pit, and a game called Annihilate the Dog Who Put Me in Jail!
You can't have your party at Ducky Cheese. Quacky's a criminal who's tried to blow up television, frame us for a gold heist, and annihilate us all.
Do you want to have my party at your house?
It's jokes like these that really take me out of the experience, and wish they could have put more creative energy into justifying these stories instead of acknowledging how dumb they are. Dogs are extremely loyal animals. There, that's your reason. It can even be cute in a weird way. And that's all I've really got on Tuff Puppy. Do I like it? Well, it depends on what you want to hear. For the very first time, I'm giving you the choice on where this review should go next. Is this a positive or mixed review? You can choose now.